All right, let's talk about teleportation. The dream, the ultimate life hack. The thing that would finally make it possible to wake up 10 minutes before work and still be on time. No more traffic, no more overpriced flights, no more awkward small talk with your Uber driver about how the weather has been really weird lately. Just poof, you're there. Sounds great, right? But let's be real. Teleportation is one of those things we all desperately want to exist, but deep down we suspect it's going to come with some issues. You know, minor things like accidentally materializing inside a wall, or realizing that every time you teleport, the old you is actually getting vaporized and a new copy is being printed at your destination. Fun stuff. So today we're going to break it down. What would teleportation actually look like if we made it work? Is it even possible? And most importantly, will it finally let me avoid waiting in line at the DMV? First off, let's acknowledge the obvious. Teleportation is not just stepping into a portal and stepping out somewhere else. The closest thing we have to teleportation is something called quantum teleportation, which sounds cool but is absolutely not what you think it is. It doesn't involve moving a physical object from one place to another. Instead, it transfers information about a particle, allowing an identical version to be recreated somewhere else. Let me put that in normal human words. If you were to teleport using this method, you wouldn't actually move anywhere. Instead, your entire body would have to be scanned down to the atomic level, all your data would be sent to your destination, and then you'd be reconstructed from scratch. Sounds fine, except for the small, tiny issue that the original you would have to be destroyed in the process. Yeah, so technically, teleportation would be less like travel and more like high-speed cloning with a slight side effect of instant death. But hey, details. Now I know what you're thinking. Hold on. If every teleportation trip means I get obliterated and a copy of me pops up on the other side, is it really me arriving or just a very convincing imposter? And that, my friends, is where the existential crisis kicks in. Because if teleportation works by copying you perfectly, then technically, the you that steps into the teleportation machine never actually makes it out. They just stop existing. Meanwhile, a fresh new you, who thinks they're the same person, walks off like nothing happened. Would you still use it? Would it even matter? Or are we all just a bunch of replaceable meat machines with memories? All right, I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's take a breath. Deep inhale. That's enough nightmare fuel for now. We've talked about the theoretical side of teleportation, the quantum weirdness, the horrifying possibility of cloning yourself to death, and the fact that scientists really need to stop inventing things that cause existential crises. But what about actual experiments? Has anyone tried teleportation, or is this one of those things that only exists in late-night conspiracy theories and badly written sci-fi novels? Well, buckle up, because as it turns out, teleportation has been tested. And the results? Well, they range from mildly interesting to please stop playing God. 1. The spooky world of quantum teleportation. Let's start with the only kind of teleportation that actually works. Back in 1997, a group of physicists at the University of Innsbruck successfully teleported a single photon. No, not a human, not a cheeseburger, not even a mosquito, just one tiny particle of light. But this was a big deal because it proved that information could be teleported instantly from one place to another using quantum entanglement. Now I know what you're thinking. What's quantum entanglement, and can I use it to avoid paying for Uber? Good question. Quantum entanglement is basically when two particles become so connected that whatever happens to one instantly happens to the other, no matter how far apart they are. Einstein, who did not like this idea, called it spooky action at a distance, which, let's be honest, is not a phrase you want to hear from one of the smartest people in history. Fast forward to today, and scientists have teleported photons over 100 kilometers. The Chinese space program even teleported particles into space using a satellite called Mischief in 2017, which is cool and all, but let's be real, until they can teleport my entire body across the planet, I'm not impressed. 2. The Philadelphia experiment, the Navy's alleged attempt at teleporting a warship. or creating a horror movie IRL. Now, if we're talking about teleportation experiments, we have to mention the Philadelphia experiment, which is either one of the greatest military cover-ups in history or just an extremely well-crafted hoax. The story goes like this. Back in 1943, the U.S. Navy supposedly tried to use electromagnetic fields to make the USS Eldridge, a massive warship, invisible to radar. Sounds reasonable, right? Just some good old government-funded sci-fi experiments? Well, according to conspiracy theorists, things went horribly wrong. Instead of just disappearing from radar, the ship vanished completely, only to reappear hundreds of miles away in Norfolk, Virginia, for a few minutes before teleporting back to Philadelphia. And when it returned, the crew was in bad shape. Supposedly, some sailors had melted into the walls of the ship. Others had gone insane. Some even vanished into thin air. Now, let's be clear. There's zero official evidence that this actually happened. The U.S. Navy has denied it repeatedly, and most historians think it's just a mix of misunderstood experiments and urban legends. But still, imagine if it were true. Imagine a military teleportation device that kind of works, but also occasionally fuses people into solid metal. Yeah, hard pass. 3. Soviet teleportation experiments, because of course the USSR tried this. If there's one thing we've learned from history, it's that the Soviet Union was always down to try weird, potentially dangerous science experiments. So it shouldn't surprise you that, in the 1980s, Soviet scientists claimed to have teleported small objects using an experimental technique called psychotronic teleportation. Now I know what you're thinking. Did they actually teleport something, or were they just messing with people? And the answer is, we have no idea. The Soviets weren't exactly known for sharing their research, and most Western scientists were skeptical about their claims. But some reports suggested that they were experimenting with mind-over-matter techniques, basically trying to teleport objects using pure thought. So yeah, either they were decades ahead of everyone else in teleportation science, or they were just seeing how much vodka it takes before a scientist starts hallucinating. 4. The CIA's Stargate project and the search for psychic teleportation. Now, speaking of governments funding questionable teleportation research, let's talk about the CIA. During the Cold War, the US government spent millions of dollars on a real project called Stargate, which, despite the cool name, had nothing to do with sci-fi wormholes. Instead, they were studying remote viewing, a supposed psychic ability where someone could see events happening far away. Now, this wasn't exactly teleportation, but the idea was similar. Could a person mentally project themselves across vast distances and spy on enemies without actually being there? Spoiler alert, it didn't work, at least not well enough to replace actual spies. But the fact that the US government actually spent money on this tells you just how desperate they were to get an edge on the Soviets. So, where does that leave us? All right, so we've got quantum teleportation. Only works for particles, not humans. Weird military experiments may or may not have resulted in teleporting warships. Soviets trying to teleport stuff with their minds, which, okay. The CIA throwing money at psychic teleportation, because why not? At this point, I think it's safe to say that while teleportation isn't impossible, it's also not happening anytime soon. But if history has taught us anything, it's that science fiction has a way of becoming science fact. 100 years ago, people would have laughed at the idea of smartphones, Wi-Fi, or AI. And yet here we are, watching cat videos on our phones while AI writes our emails for us. So we've covered the science, the theories, and the completely bonkers experiments that governments may or may not have actually done. At this point, you're probably wondering, okay, but what about the future? Is teleportation something I'll get to experience in my lifetime? Or is this just another thing like flying cars that never actually happens? Great question. Let's break it down. The main problem with teleportation, aside from the whole potentially dying and getting replaced by a copy of yourself thing, is that moving physical matter without physically moving it is unbelievably difficult. Think about it like this. If you wanted to teleport even a single molecule of water from one place to another, you'd have to scan every single atom in that molecule, record their exact position and quantum state, send that data somewhere else, reconstruct the molecule perfectly using new atoms. Now let's scale that up. The human body is made up of about 7 octillion atoms. That's a 7 followed by 27 zeros. Each of those atoms would have to be scanned, stored, transmitted, and rebuilt perfectly. The amount of data required to store a person's atomic structure is so massive that even if we used every computer on Earth right now, it would still take thousands of years just to process one teleportation. So yeah, even ignoring the fact that your original body might have to be destroyed, we simply don't have the technology to scan that much information fast enough. And even if we did, we'd need energy levels so ridiculous that it might actually be easier to just invent time travel instead. Could AI solve this problem? Now I know what you're thinking. Wait a minute, AI is getting crazy good at solving impossible problems. Couldn't AI eventually figure out how to compress all that teleportation data and make this work? Possibly. AI is already revolutionizing genetics, physics, and even space travel, so it's not completely out of the question that it could optimize the teleportation process. In fact, some scientists believe that if we ever map out the human brain perfectly, we might be able to upload our consciousness into a digital form. At that point, teleportation might not involve moving your body, it might just involve moving your mind. Imagine this. Instead of teleporting your atoms, you upload your thoughts, memories, and personality into a system that can beam them to another body waiting at the destination. Would that count as teleportation? Or would that just be copying your consciousness while the real you gets left behind? Yeah, I know. Another existential crisis. All right, now let's get really weird. What if teleportation isn't just about moving through space, but also moving through dimensions? Some physicists believe in something called the multiverse theory, which suggests that there are an infinite number of parallel universes, each slightly different from the one we're in now. What if teleportation is actually just a way of hopping between different realities? Think about it. If there are infinite versions of you, then maybe teleporting doesn't actually move your body. Maybe it just shifts your consciousness into the version of you that already exists somewhere else. So instead of disappearing and reappearing, you're just jumping into an alternate reality where you were already standing there. And now we're officially in Rick and Morty territory. What if we accidentally teleport wrong? Even if we do figure out a safe way to teleport, there's still one huge issue: glitches. Let's say you step into a teleportation pod and something goes wrong. What's the worst that could happen? Option 1, you teleport, but you end up missing a few important things, like your clothes or your left arm. Option 2, you teleport and accidentally merge with someone else who was trying to teleport at the same time. Boom, instant horror movie. Option 3, you teleport and arrive at the wrong place, like the bottom of the ocean or in the middle of deep space. Not great. Option 4, you teleport and accidentally duplicate yourself, leaving 2 versions of you alive at the same time. Which raises an awkward question. Who gets to keep your job and your girlfriend? And this isn't just wild speculation. Scientists already know that errors happen all the time in quantum teleportation experiments. If we ever scale this up to human levels, even the smallest mistake could lead to catastrophic results. Could we build a teleportation network? All right, let's assume we eventually solve all these problems. No glitches, no existential dilemmas, just pure, safe teleportation. Would teleportation be something anyone could use? Or would it be super expensive and only available to the ultra-rich? Would governments regulate it? Would there be teleportation traffic jams? Would we need passports anymore? And most importantly, would I still have to pay for checked baggage? Some experts think teleportation could function like the internet, where people connect to teleportation hubs located in big cities. Instead of owning a teleportation pod in your house, you'd have to go to a public teleportation station, kind of like an airport but way faster, and hopefully with fewer crying babies. But let's be real, if teleportation ever becomes mainstream, we're 100% going to see scammers using it for dumb stuff. Imagine getting a teleportation virus that accidentally sends you to Antarctica, or hackers who teleport your wallet away from you. We've gone through the science, the theories, the weird experiments, and the terrifying possibilities of what could go wrong. So now comes the real question. Would you actually use teleportation if it existed? Let's be honest, we as humans are lazy. If someone told me I could skip traffic, skip airports, skip sitting next to someone who insists on telling me their life story on a 5-hour flight, I'd be interested. But then I remember, what if this is just a really fancy way to die? If teleportation works by scanning and reconstructing you, how do you know you're actually you when you get to the other side? What if every time you teleport, the real you just dies and a new version picks up where you left off? Now I know some of you are thinking, who cares? If I arrive thinking I'm the same person, does it really matter? To which I say, would you step into a machine that kills you so a copy of you can keep living? Yeah, that's what I thought. So, where does that leave us? For now, teleportation is stuck in the realm of theoretical physics and science fiction. The best we've got is quantum teleportation, which can only move tiny particles and won't be replacing airplanes anytime soon. But that doesn't mean we'll never get there. 100 years ago, flying across the world in a few hours seemed impossible. Talking to someone on the other side of the planet instantly seemed like magic. And yet, here we are, texting people we haven't seen in 5 years, and then ignoring their response for another week. If history has taught us anything, it's that today's science fiction is tomorrow's reality. So maybe one day, teleportation will exist. Maybe we'll figure out a way to move people without turning them into data. Maybe future generations will laugh at us for wasting hours on road trips. Or maybe, just maybe, we'll look back and say, you know what? Some things are better the old-fashioned way. Because let's be real, do we really want to live in a world where anyone can teleport into our house uninvited? Until then, I guess I'll just have to keep waking up early for flights like everyone else. Thanks for watching, and if you enjoyed this, don't forget to like, subscribe, and let me know in the comments. Would you use teleportation if it meant you might not be the real you on the other side? Because I still haven't decided.